My name is Sarah, and I am 29 years old. This past Christmas, the story my family had been telling themselves for decades, the one where I was the perpetual disappointment, finally came to a spectacular and crashing end. I knew this particular holiday dinner was destined for disaster the moment my mother, Linda, raised her wine glass with a self-satisfied gleam in her eye. The roasted turkey was still giving off steam in the center of the table when she leaned back, her voice carrying across the room with practiced ease. She looked at me and said, "Your sister has just bought a magnificent new house. When are you going to finally get your own life in order, Sarah?" My sister, Madison, did not even bother with subtlety. She just smirked at me over the rim of her glass and piled on, saying, "Yes, Sarah, when are you going to finally grow up and become a real adult?" The chattering around the table died instantly, replaced by a heavy silence. Everyone was waiting for me to give my usual weak, self-deprecating laugh and change the subject, but this time I just smiled. It was not the polite, accommodating smile they were so accustomed to. It was the quiet, unshakable smile of someone who is holding a winning hand, a secret that no one in that room was worthy of knowing. I met my mother's gaze and said, my voice perfectly level, "I already have. I just chose not to invite anyone who doubts me to the housewarming." The color drained from her face, then flooded back in a rush of crimson that was almost comical. All around the table, forks froze in mid-air, and every pair of eyes was fixed on me, as if they were truly seeing me for the very first time. If you think that one sentence came out of nowhere, I assure you it did not. It was a foundation built over years of being ignored, of being dismissed, and of being relentlessly compared to a golden child I could never hope to surpass. Stick with me to the end, and I will tell you exactly how the invisible daughter managed to buy her own home in cash, turned a Christmas dinner into a final reckoning, and finally found the strength to walk away from a family that never believed she was enough. That Christmas dinner was just the final act of a very long play. The real story began years ago, in a quiet, manicured suburb outside of Chicago, inside a house where my mother, Linda, had decided very early on who the star of the family was going to be. And it was never going to be me. My older sister, Madison, is 3 years older than me. As the firstborn, she was the beautiful one, the outgoing one, the one who could walk into any room and command it like a stage. My father, David, was an architect, a man perpetually lost in blueprints and project deadlines, which meant the bulk of the day-to-day parenting fell squarely on my mother. And my mother made it abundantly clear that Madison was the protagonist of our family's story, and I was, at best, a background character. I can still vividly remember the year Madison won some local talent show. My mother went into overdrive. She threw a massive party that spilled out from our living room onto the lawn. There was a gigantic cake meticulously shaped like a first-place ribbon, clusters of balloons in every corner, and what felt like our entire extended family crammed inside, snapping photos of Madison as if she had just secured a gold medal at the Olympics. My Aunt Karen kept loudly declaring how proud she was. My cousin, Maya, her daughter, stood beside me amidst the chaos and whispered, "This is a bit much for a plastic trophy, don't you think?" But my mother was absolutely glowing. That very same year, I won first place in a statewide essay competition. There was no party for me, no balloons, no congratulatory cake. My mother just glanced at the certificate while she was stirring a pot on the stove and said, "Oh, that is nice, Sarah, but have you seen what Madison is achieving?" She held up a framed photo of my sister in her sequined costume, as if that single image was the only accomplishment in the house that truly mattered. These moments were the constant rhythm of my childhood. When I was 10, I had been looking forward to a planned family picnic for weeks. The morning we were supposed to go, my mom came into my room without knocking and announced, "We have to cancel the picnic. Madison needs a new dress for a school dance and the big sale is only today." I suggested we could go afterward, or even the next day, but she dismissed it with a wave of her hand. "Your sister's needs are more pressing right now, Sarah." On another occasion, I had a piano recital that I had practiced for months to perfect. As I sat at the grand piano on the stage, my hands trembling slightly, I scanned the audience for my mother's face, but her seat was conspicuously empty. I found out later she had skipped it entirely because Madison had a last-minute volleyball scrimmage. Her justification was that Madison's team was counting on her and that people depend on Madison. It did not matter what I did or how hard I worked, it was always relegated to second place. I was the quiet one, the bookish kid who found more comfort in notebooks and libraries than in social gatherings. During family parties, I would retreat to a corner while everyone else orbited Madison, hanging on her every word about her friends, her social life, and her future plans. After the noise and the guests had finally gone, Maya would always find me. She would sit on the edge of my bed or join me on the back porch steps and say, "She has no idea what she is missing out on with you." Her words were a small comfort, but they did not change the fundamental reality that inside that house, I felt like a ghost. My mother was so busy polishing Madison's spotlight that she acted like I should just be grateful for the ambient glow. Have you ever had that feeling, growing up in your own home, that you are not the one they are cheering for? You are just the one who is expected to stand silently in the wings and clap for someone else. By the time I reached my late teens, the blatant favoritism had evolved from being about attention and trophies to being about money and future opportunities. When Madison graduated from high school, my mother, Linda, sat her down at the kitchen table, which she had covered with a spread of brochures from a local community college. "We want you to stay close to home, sweetheart," she had cooed. "Community college is the perfect choice for you. It will keep you stable, surrounded by your support system." What she really meant was that she wanted to keep Madison under her thumb. Every cost was covered without question, including tuition, books, gas for her car, and spending money. It was all handled. Madison drifted between a few classes, a lot of parties, and whatever new clique she had attached herself to that semester. My mother optimistically called it networking. When it was my turn to think about college, the conversation was starkly different. I told my parents I had my heart set on a state university to study data analytics, fascinated by the intersection of creative strategy and hard numbers. My mother barely glanced up from scrolling through her phone. "That sounds very expensive, Sarah. Maybe you should set your sights on something smaller, something more practical." My father, David, just mumbled something about looking into scholarships as he grabbed his briefcase, already halfway out the door to another site visit. And that was the end of the discussion. No one sat me down with a stack of pamphlets. No one promised to cover a single dollar. So I took matters into my own hands. I spent countless nights online, my eyes burning from the screen's glare as I filled out every scholarship application I could find. I got a part-time job as a barista at a local coffee shop where I mastered the art of frothing milk, smiling through interactions with rude customers, and cramming in homework during my 10-minute breaks. When the acceptance letter from the University of Illinois finally arrived, bundled with a significant financial aid package, my mother's only comment was, "Well, if they are going to pay for most of it, then I suppose you can go." Madison, meanwhile, stayed in town, meandering through her community college program. Unsurprisingly, she spent far more time at local bars and social events than she ever did in a lecture hall. Yet, every time she managed to pass a class, my mother would speak of it as if she had witnessed a miracle. When Madison finally cobbled together enough credits for her associate's degree and landed a retail sales job at a boutique in the city, my mother insisted on a grand celebration. She booked a table at a fancy Italian restaurant downtown, invited all the extended family, ordered appetizers for everyone, and delivered a heartfelt toast about how deeply proud she was of her firstborn's accomplishments. Maya and I just clinked our glasses of soda and exchanged a knowing look. A few years later, I graduated from university with honors. I walked across that stage, heard my name called, and felt the immense weight and satisfaction of every late night, every double shift, and every sacrifice I had made. After the ceremony, as my friends gathered with their beaming families for photos, I checked my phone. I had a single short text from my mother. It said, "Congrats, honey. Your sister is swamped at work. You should give her a call and tell her all about your day. No offer of a celebratory dinner. No toast. No family gathering." The sting was sharp, but it also brought a cold, hard clarity. If I was going to wait for my family to celebrate my achievements, I would be waiting for the rest of my life. After graduation, I found a small apartment in Chicago. The walls were paper thin, the old windows let in a constant draft, and the kitchen was a tiny alcove barely big enough for one person, but it was all mine. I landed an entry-level position at a small market research firm, the kind of place where you wear a dozen hats because there is no one else to do the work. I ran social media analytics, wrote ad copy, pulled complex data reports, and spent my evenings watching tutorials to teach myself the strategies behind successful campaigns. My diet consisted of discounted groceries from wholesale clubs, and I learned to cook by following simple recipes on my phone. I tracked every single dollar in a meticulous spreadsheet. My mother called frequently, but our conversations were a broken record, always circling back to Madison. Your sister just got a small bonus. Your sister might be up for a promotion to assistant manager. Your sister is thinking about moving to a much nicer neighborhood. The few times I tried to share a small victory from my own life, she would cut me off by saying, "That is nice, dear, but did you hear what Madison is doing?" After a while, I just stopped trying. I let her continue to believe I was just scraping by, barely keeping my head above water, living out the small, unremarkable life she had always envisioned for me. I poured all of my frustrated energy into my work instead. Because when your own family treats you like you are the backup plan, sometimes the only option you have left is to build a foundation so solid that no one's opinion can ever shake you again. I just had no idea yet how far that quiet determination would take me, or how much it would all come to a head on a single Christmas night a few years down the road. The definitive turning point arrived on a cold holiday evening 3 years before that fateful Christmas dinner, back when a small part of me still desperately craved my mother's approval. I had just wrapped up my first major project at the firm. It was a comprehensive market analysis for a mid-sized local company looking to connect with a younger demographic. I had poured my entire being into it, including late nights, weekends, and learning new data visualization tools on my own time. When the final numbers came in, and we saw that our campaign had driven a sales increase of nearly 30%, my boss literally applauded in the middle of our open plan office. He pulled me into his office and said, "Sarah, this is the kind of work that gets people noticed and promoted." I went home that week feeling a flicker of hope, the sense that I was finally, truly building a life that had substance. So when my mother insisted I come home for the holiday dinner, I agreed. A part of me wanted to show her I was not just surviving in the city, I was thriving. Maybe, I thought, this time she would finally be proud. The house was a picture of holiday cheer with warm lights, the familiar smell of my mother's cooking, and my mom herself, directing traffic in the kitchen like a seasoned general. Madison, naturally, arrived late, making a grand entrance with a new designer coat, expensive-looking boots, and a dramatic story about her co-workers. She embraced my mother first, then gave me a brief, perfunctory hug, the kind you give a distant cousin, not your own sister. We all gathered around the dining table, our plates heaped with food, the conversation a comfortable hum. My Aunt Karen asked me how work was going, and for once, my mother did not immediately interrupt. I took a deep breath and began to share my news. I told them about the successful campaign I had led, how the client had already extended their contract for the next year, and how my firm was now considering using my analytical model as a template for future projects. I saw my cousin Maya's eyes light up from across the table. "That is incredible, Sarah," she said genuinely. "That is like real career stuff, not just a job." I laughed, feeling a flush of pride. I even admitted I had received a significant bonus, enough to make a real difference in my savings. For a few brief, shining moments, the table was actually quiet, everyone listening to me. And then my mother tilted her head, a smile playing on her lips. But it was not directed at me. She turned her full attention to Madison and announced, "Speaking of big news, did everyone hear about Madison's new car? She just bought a luxury sedan, one of those beautiful German ones, so she can have a more comfortable commute." The conversation snapped away from me like a taut rubber band. My uncle immediately asked about the model. My aunt asked about the color. My mother boasted about the fantastic deal they had managed to find. I just sat there and watched as the spotlight slid right off me and settled back where it always did, squarely on Madison. Maya shot me a pained look from across the table, a silent apology that said she saw that and she was sorry. Later that night, as we were clearing the dishes, my Aunt Karen cornered me in the hallway. "Your mother just wants you to be happy," she began in that gentle, patronizing tone people use right before they say something you are going to hate. "Maybe you should not focus so much on your career. Men want a woman who can balance work and family. Madison is good at that. She is not so intimidating. You do not want to make things harder on yourself down the line." I stood there, a stack of plates growing heavy in my hands, listening to the same old tired script. Work too hard, and you are doing it wrong. Do not work hard enough, and you are a failure. No matter what, I was always the one who needed to change. On the long, quiet drive back to my apartment that night, my mother rode with me for part of the way. The old heater in my car rattled faintly as the city lights streaked past the windshield. Staring straight ahead, she said, "You know, your sister is really getting her life in order. New car, a steady job, a good man. You should really start thinking about settling down too, Sarah. You are not getting any younger." In that moment, something inside me did not break. It clicked into place with a cold, solid finality. I realized I could spend the next decade chasing her approval, and I would still end up right here, in this same car, having this exact same conversation, forever being measured against a sister I was never intended to equal. So I quit the game. I stopped giving her detailed updates about my life. At work, I went into overdrive. If no one in my own family was going to see my worth, I would make damn sure the rest of the world did. Over the next couple of years, I climbed the ladder, moving from junior analyst roles to managing major accounts. I taught myself how to translate complex data into compelling stories, how to pitch to skeptical clients, and how to lead a team effectively. Our firm landed a few national brands, and I found myself in boardrooms with executives whose names I used to only read about in industry journals. My title eventually changed to Director of Market Insights, and my salary began to reflect the thousands of hours I had invested. I started investing my money too, slowly at first, then more aggressively. I devoured books on index funds and long-term growth, downloaded a couple of investing apps, and set up automatic transfers from every paycheck. While people my age were posting pictures from expensive vacations and trendy bars, I was funneling money into accounts I promised myself I would not touch, all while continuing to live as if I were still an intern. Meanwhile, Madison's career was a series of lateral, often downward moves. She went from the clothing boutique to a receptionist position, then to some vague event coordinator role. Each time she switched jobs, my mother would spin it as a sign of her bravery and adventurous spirit. "Your sister is not afraid to reinvent herself," she would say, as if that somehow compensated for the glaring instability. The more my own life stabilized, the more I began to see the deep cracks in Madison's perfect facade. She always had new clothes, the latest gadgets, professionally styled hair, and weekend trips to show off on social media. But somehow, she was also always calling my mother, asking for a little help just to get her through to the next paycheck. My mom would sigh dramatically and complain about being tired, but the money was always transferred. I kept my mouth shut, observed, and did the math in my head. It never added up. Still, I maintained my distance. I built my career, my savings, and my life, all in the shadows. I told myself that how Madison and my mother managed their finances was none of my business. I only broke that rule the day my mother called, her voice bursting with excitement, to announce the big news, the news that would ultimately drag me right back into their spotlight, whether I liked it or not. She said Madison was finally buying a house, and the entire family needed to get together to celebrate. Before a single moving box had been packed, my mother had already turned Madison's house news into a full-scale production. A few weeks after that initial phone call, she sent a message to the family group chat, in all caps, of course, announcing a backyard barbecue to celebrate Madison's mortgage approval, as if my sister had just been handed the keys to the city. When I pulled up to my parents' house that Saturday, the scene was almost surreal. There were little house-shaped balloons tied to the mailbox and a giant cardboard key propped against the patio table. My mother had even ordered a custom cake with "Congratulations on your new home, Madison," written in elegant, looping frosting. Madison stood at the center of it all, a glass of champagne in her hand, describing her new place as if it were a modern palace. 3 bedrooms, a fully finished basement, a darling little yard, she gushed. And it is only 20 minutes from the city, perfect for when we have kids and start hosting holidays. Every few minutes, my mother would chime in with, "We are just so immensely proud. She works so hard. She deserves every bit of this." I stationed myself near the grill with my dad, flipping burgers while he muttered to himself about adjustable rate mortgages. Relatives drifted in and out, their conversations a meaningless buzz. An aunt came over and asked if I was still in that tiny apartment in Chicago, her tone the same one someone might use to ask if you were still driving a beat-up car from high school. I simply said, "Yes." She gave me a pitying smile. "Well, at least you do not have a big mortgage to worry about yet. It must be nice not having any major responsibilities." I bit down on a sharp retort and took a long sip of my flat soda instead. Later, while most of the family was gathered on the lawn taking endless photos with the cake, I slipped inside to refill the ice bucket. That is when I heard my mother's voice, low and urgent, coming from the dining room. I froze in the hallway just out of sight and listened. Madison was at the table, a thick manila envelope open in front of her, papers fanned out in a messy arc. My mom sat opposite her, her reading glasses perched on her nose, her brow creased with worry. "I just do not see how you are going to manage all of this," my mother said, her voice strained. "You have 3 credit cards that are nearly maxed out, your car payment, and now this massive mortgage." Madison let out a dramatic sigh. "I know, Mom, but if I do not buy a place now, I will be priced out forever. Everyone our age is buying property. I cannot be the only one left renting. You know how that looks." My mother rubbed her temples. "How much are you short for the closing costs again?" Madison slid a document across the table. "Around 15,000, she mumbled. "Maybe a little more if they do not waive some of the fees. I was thinking maybe you could pull from your savings or the retirement account again. Just this once? Just until I get that big promotion I am up for. Just this once." It was the same phrase I had heard her use for everything from high school homework extensions to unpaid parking tickets. Always, just this once. My mother hesitated for a long moment, then sighed in resignation. "I will see what I can move around. Maybe I can put some of it on my credit card for now, just to get you settled." A wave of nausea washed over me. I thought about the time I had asked my mother for a few $100s to help with the security deposit on my first apartment, and she had lectured me on the importance of learning to stand on my own 2 feet. I thought about every extra shift I had ever worked, every weekend I had stayed in to save money, all to build the very savings she was now so casually raiding to fund Madison's charade. I backed away silently before they could see me, my heart hammering against my ribs. A few minutes later, I walked back into the dining room as if I had just come inside, and they both snapped on bright, brittle smiles. My mom quickly slid the papers back into the envelope. Madison tucked it into her designer handbag, and the performance resumed outside on the patio, where the cake and cameras were waiting. That night, back in my small, quiet apartment, I opened my laptop and stared at my own numbers. I pulled up my checking account, my investment portfolio, and my high-yield savings. Years of relentless work, disciplined saving, and quiet investing had compounded into a sum far greater than I had ever let myself fully acknowledge. While my mother had been pouring her financial resources into propping up Madison's image, I had been pouring mine into building an actual future. For the very first time, the idea that I could buy my own home did not feel like a distant dream. It felt like a mathematical certainty. Within weeks, I was meeting with a realtor in a quiet community nestled in the woods outside the city. We walked through a charming cottage with huge windows, a wide front porch, and a view of a serene reservoir that made my chest ache with a sense of peace. 3 bedrooms, an open-concept kitchen, and a small sunlit office at the back that looked directly out onto the water. No shared walls, no noisy upstairs neighbors. The price tag made my palms sweat, but when I sat down with a financial advisor and we went over my assets line by line, he looked at me over his glasses and said something that would stick with me forever. "You have done the hard work, Sarah. You can afford this. In fact, you could pay for it in cash if you want to avoid the headache of a mortgage." So that is exactly what I did. I liquidated accounts I had been nurturing for years, consolidated my funds, and wired the full amount. There were no loans, no co-signers, and no desperate late-night phone calls to my mother. On the day I got the keys, I stood alone in the vast, empty living room and just listened to the silence. There was no city traffic, no arguing neighbors, just the gentle lapping of water against the shore and the sound of my own, steady breathing. It felt like I was stepping into a life that nobody, least of all my family, had ever seen coming. Maya was the only person I told at first. She drove out one Saturday with her car trunk full of houseplants and a toolbox, walked through the front door, and her face broke into a massive grin. "Sarah," she said, her voice filled with awe. "This is unbelievable. This is like definitive proof that you were never the loser in their story." We spent the entire weekend assembling furniture, unboxing kitchen supplies, and happily arguing over where to place the sofa. We made trips to department stores, filling carts with towels and lamps, and by Sunday evening, the house was starting to look less like a real estate listing and more like a home. At one point, Maya stood in the doorway of my new office, looking out at the water, and asked if they had any clue at all. I shook my head and told her no, and that for now, I wanted to keep it that way. I did not want my home, my sanctuary, to be turned into another prop for Madison's drama or another talking point for my mother. I wanted to have this one part of my life that was completely and utterly mine, untouched by their judgment and their expectations. I honestly believed I could keep it that way. I thought I could let them live in their fantasy world, where they decided who was winning and who was losing while I existed peacefully here by the water. I had no idea that a single Christmas dinner would drag my secret out into the blinding light, whether they were ready for it or not. Christmas at Madison's new house was straight out of a magazine. The living room was elegantly draped in twinkling white lights. A massive, perfectly decorated tree glittered in the corner, and the air was thick with the scent of cinnamon and baking sugar. She had a curated playlist of quiet Christmas music, setting a festive but sophisticated mood. And my mother, Linda, was in her element, moving around the kitchen as if it were her own, telling every guest who walked in how proud she was. I pulled up in my old, reliable sedan, parked a few houses down the street, and just sat there for a moment staring at the brightly lit front door. A huge part of me wanted to just turn the car around, drive back to my quiet cottage in the woods, and spend the night with a frozen pizza and my cat. But instead, I took a deep breath, grabbed the obligatory bottle of wine I had brought, and walked up the pristine driveway. Madison answered the door wearing a chic red sweater dress and flawless makeup, a look practically engineered for Instagram. She gave me a light, airy hug, her eyes quickly scanning my simple outfit. "You look nice," she commented. "A little simple, but nice. Classic Madison." Inside, the relatives were already settled. My Aunt Karen and my uncle were on the sofa. Maya was leaning against a wall, scrolling on her phone, but she shot me a quick, supportive smile as I came in. My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron, and kissed my cheek. "I am so glad you could make it," she said, her tone implying I was the one who should be grateful for the invitation. Dinner was loud, a chaotic symphony of clinking silverware and overlapping conversations. The table was groaning under the weight of the food, including a huge turkey, bowls of mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, stuffing, and baskets of warm rolls. For a while, I managed to successfully fade into the background, listening more than I spoke, offering vague, non-committal answers to the polite questions about my job and life in the city. I was halfway through my second bite of turkey when it happened. My mother lifted her wine glass, tapped it gently with her fork, and the room fell silent. "I just want to say again how incredibly proud I am of my daughter," she announced, beaming at Madison. Buying this beautiful house, building a real future for herself, being truly settled. This, everyone, is what stability looks like. Then, her eyes swiveled to me, and I felt the atmospheric shift before the words even left her mouth. "Your sister bought this magnificent house, Sarah," she said, her voice just a little too loud, a little too pointed. "When are you going to finally get your own life in order and settle down?" A ripple of awkwardness went around the table. A few people coughed. Madison did not miss a beat. She tilted her head, a cruel smirk playing on her lips, and added, "Yeah, Sarah. When are you going to stop acting like a broke college student and get your life together? You cannot live in that tiny apartment forever." For a split second, there was dead silence. Forks hovered over plates. I saw Maya's eyes dart to mine, wide with alarm. It would have been so easy to do what I had always done, give a weak laugh, shrug it off, and let the moment pass. But I was not that girl anymore. The key to my own house was sitting in my purse, a small, cold piece of metal that felt like a shield. So I took a deliberate swallow of food, placed my fork down on my plate, and looked directly at my mother. "I am actually already settled," I said, my voice calm and even. I just chose not to invite anyone who doubts me to the housewarming. My mother blinked, completely thrown. Then she let out a short, confused laugh, as if I had told a joke she did not understand. "What on earth are you talking about?" she asked dismissively. "Sarah, do not be so dramatic. You rent an apartment. That is not the same thing." I held her gaze, refusing to look away. "I am not renting," I stated clearly. "I bought a house a few months ago. 3 bedrooms, a home office, and a yard that goes right down to the reservoir. I paid for it in cash." The silence that fell over that table was so profound it was almost physical. Someone's fork actually clattered onto their plate. My Aunt Karen's jaw dropped. My uncle froze mid-sip. My mother's condescending smile froze, cracked, and then melted away completely. Ashley let out a short, sharp bark of disbelief. "Oh, sure you did," she scoffed. "You bought a whole house. With cash. Come on, Sarah, nobody appreciates a liar, especially on Christmas." Maya's voice cut through the tension, soft but firm. "She is not lying," she said, looking around the table. "I have been there. It is real, and it is beautiful." Every head in the room swiveled to Maya, then snapped back to me. My mother shook her head slowly, her expression a mixture of confusion and anger. "Why would you buy a house and not tell your own family? Because every single time I tried to show you a piece of my life, you changed the subject to hers," I replied, my voice gaining strength. "You did not want to hear about my degree, my job, or my promotions. Why on earth would you suddenly care about my house?" "This is ridiculous," my mother snapped, her face turning a blotchy red. "Your sister worked incredibly hard for this place. The least you could do is be happy for her instead of trying to one-up her at her own celebration dinner." That is when the anger finally rose in me. Not hot and wild, but a cold, steady fire that made everything perfectly clear. I turned to Madison. I am happy for anyone who can afford a home, I said. What I am not happy about is you pretending you did it all by yourself while you drain Mom's retirement fund and run up her credit cards like it is Monopoly money. Madison's face went rigid. "Excuse me?" she hissed. "You do not know the first thing about my finances." "Actually, I know a little," I countered. "I overheard the two of you at the last barbecue. 3 maxed-out cards, a car payment, and you were short $15,000 for the closing costs. So Mom had to raid her retirement account. Again. I was not digging for information. You were just loud." My mother's eyes widened in panic as she shot a guilty glance at Madison. "That is none of your business," Madison spat. "So now you are spying on us, eavesdropping. That is just pathetic." "What is pathetic?" I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Is Mom telling me for years that she could not help me with a simple security deposit because it was important for me to learn to stand on my own 2 feet, and then turning around and lighting herself on fire financially just to keep your perfect image from going up in smoke? I have been standing on my own 2 feet for years. You are standing on her bank account." My aunt shifted uncomfortably in her seat. My uncle cleared his throat loudly. Someone at the end of the table muttered, "Wow." My mother's voice was tight with fury. "Sarah, that is enough. You are ruining Christmas." "No, Mom," I said, my voice dropping to a quiet finality. "You ruined Christmas the moment you decided to use it as a public stage to humiliate me while anointing Madison. I'm just finally answering back." There was a long, heavy pause. Madison leaned forward, her eyes narrowed into slits. "So you think you are so much better than me now?" she sneered. "Because you have some little cottage and a job with a fancy title?" I met her hostile stare without flinching. "No," I said. "I do not think I am better than you. I think I finally stopped playing a game that was rigged against me from the start. That is all." I pushed my chair back from the table. The legs made a loud scraping sound on the hardwood floor, but I did not care. I reached for my purse and stood up. "Where do you think you are going?" my mother demanded. "We are not finished talking about this." "I think we are," I said calmly. "You made it clear a long, long time ago whose side you were on. Tonight, I just made it clear that I am finally on my own." For a second, no one moved. Then, almost instinctively, Maya stood up too. "I will walk you out," she said. We walked across the room, past a dozen stunned and silent faces, and stepped out into the biting cold of the winter night. As the front door clicked shut behind us, muffling the chaos inside, I felt my racing heart finally begin to slow. I could feel the shock waves I had left in that dining room, the deep fractures that had just shattered the story my family had told themselves for years. And as I walked down the driveway toward my car, keys clutched tightly in my hand, a single thought settled in my chest, solid and permanent. For the first time in my entire life, I'd not just survived a family holiday, I had ended it. In the 3 weeks that followed that Christmas dinner, the family group chat was a digital ghost town. The usual flood of all-caps messages from my mother about Madison's new curtains or the perfection of her neighborhood had ceased entirely. Instead, there were just long, awkward silences, punctuated by random forwarded memes from relatives who were desperately trying to pretend nothing had happened. The only person who texted me normally was Maya. She sent me a message one night that read, "You know they are all still talking about it, right? The way you just smiled when you dropped that cottage bomb. You are officially a family legend now." I was sitting at my kitchen table when I read her text, my laptop open and my cat curled on the chair next to me. I looked around at my home, the home no one believed I could ever have, and for the first time I felt a sense of peace associated with the word family. A few days later, I invited Maya and her parents, my Aunt Karen and my uncle, to spend a weekend at my place. They showed up with a car full of snacks and not nearly enough warm jackets, alternately complaining about the cold and marveling at the view from my windows. We cooked meals together, took long walks along the frozen edge of the reservoir, and played board games late into the night. At one point, my Aunt Karen stood by the window, watching the pale winter sun glint off the water, and said quietly, "I am sorry, Sarah, for all those years. I should have spoken up." I just shrugged, not out of disrespect, but because I was finally done carrying the weight of everyone else's regrets. "You see it now," I said. "That is what matters." As winter slowly thawed into spring, news about Madison and my mother trickled down to me in fragments, mostly through Maya. The mountain of credit card debt Madison had been juggling finally triggered an avalanche. The big promotion she had been banking on never materialized. Her performance at work tanked under the crushing weight of missed payments, constant calls from collection agencies, and unrelenting stress. A few months after that Christmas, her company went through a round of layoffs, and she was one of the first people let go. Without her paycheck, the house that had been my mother's proudest talking point quickly became an anchor, dragging them both down. They struggled to make the mortgage payments for a while, but the math simply did not work. Eventually, Madison was forced to put the house on the market. The dream home that had earned her a backyard standing ovation was sold off to pay back a fraction of the debt she had accumulated while trying to look successful. My mother, Linda, started calling me incessantly once things began to truly unravel. At first, the voicemails were laced with anger. "How could you embarrass your sister like that in front of everyone?" Then, they shifted to desperate pleading. "We are still your family, Sarah. Your sister needs help. You have money now. You could loan her some, just until she is back on her feet." And then, buried deep within one rambling message, were the words I thought I would never hear. "I am sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. I did not realize how much I was hurting you." I listened to every single one of those messages, sitting on my porch, looking out at the calm water, and I realized something crucial. An apology does not erase years of being made to feel small. It does not magically obligate you to step back into a role that nearly broke you. So I called her back, one last time. "Mom," I said, "I am glad you are starting to understand what happened. I truly am. But I spent my entire life being the one you overlooked, the one you expected to sacrifice everything so someone else could shine. I am not doing that anymore. I am not going to fix problems that were created by choices I did not make. I love you, but I am done." Then I set the boundaries I never thought I would have the courage to enforce. Fewer phone calls, no more conversations about money, no more guilt trips about Madison. And when those lines were inevitably ignored, I did what I had to do. I blocked numbers. I muted chats. I chose my own hard-won peace over their toxic version of loyalty. I poured all that reclaimed energy into my work, my friendships, and into something new. I started volunteering at a local women's empowerment center, helping women who felt trapped by family expectations or financial dependency learn small, practical ways to build their own freedom. I helped them create budgets, polish their resumes, and develop basic marketing skills for side hustles. Sitting across from them, listening to their stories, I recognized so many pieces of my own. The ignored daughter, the overly responsible one, the one everyone just assumes will be fine, so no one ever bothers to ask if she actually is. If there is any lesson to be taken from what happened to me, it is this. Being the invisible child does not mean you are powerless. Sometimes it just means you are the one quietly building a life strong enough to eventually walk away. Parents can play favorites, and siblings can soak up all the light in the room. But at the end of the day, you are the only one who has to live with the consequences of your choices. You are allowed to draw a line in the sand. You are allowed to say no, even to family. You are allowed to build something wonderful that they never saw coming, and then fiercely protect it from the very people who doubted you. If you ever grew up feeling like a background character in your own life, I hope my story is a reminder that you do not have to stay there. You can choose yourself, even when it makes other people profoundly uncomfortable. And if you have ever had to break your own heart by stepping away from a family that refused to see your worth, please know you are not alone. End of story.